I've learned over the years that when I hear people say I'm busy, my immediate thought is, then I wonder what's broken. Because if you're busy all the time and all you do is work, or all you do is whatever the thing that you justified busy with, something is getting broken.
Yeah.
Something or someone is getting broken. It could be your wife, it could be your husband, it could be your kids, it could be your soul.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that we will sacrifice on the altar of busy that are not blessed.
My name is Caroline, and I'm a counselor.
My name is Brett, and I'm a pastor.
And together, we're tackling difficult topics from a biblical perspective.
Welcome to There We Said It.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's another week here at There We Said It. We're still saying it.
Yeah, we are. We're saying what we say and standing by it, too.
Yes, we are. So thank you for listening, because if you keep listening, we can keep saying it.
That's right. We can keep talking.
I love it.
Yeah.
So there you go. How's it going?
It's going good.
Yeah. So we're going to do a question this morning, today,
Okay.
whatever time of day it is that you're listening to this. What is the question?
So the question, so this is an effort for the viewing and listening audience to get to know us a little bit more. The question was, what is something that is unique or surprising about you? And this may be something that when people find out this thing, they're like, wow, I wouldn't have suspected that, or I didn't know that. So Caroline, I asked you that question. What is something that is unique and surprising about Caroline?
Don't make me go first.
Okay. If I wait long enough, will it get awkward and you'll fill the space?
No, because I actually, there you go. I love awkward silence.
Okay.
There's my unique and surprising thing.
Really?
Yeah.
That's your unique and surprising thing, that you will sit there and not say a word.
Yeah.
For how
long? It's like a gifting, however long it needs to be.
Forever, huh? You're that one that's like...
Yeah. I'll just stare at you and be like...
No.
Like, let's just do it.
Do you just like nod your head at them, like just affirming their... No?
No, just sit there.
You just sit there like flat?
Just look,
wow.
Yeah. And I see them squirm and I'm just like...
Yeah, I would melt under that pressure. I would immediately feel like I have to fill the void with something, even if it's like a groan or like...
then we dive into that and I would ask,
like, what was that?
Why do you feel like you have to fill the awkward silence?
Yeah, Brett, what's wrong with you?
Well, that's one. For the listening audience who can't see me, I'll say I'm a redhead.
Yes.
But that might not be surprising because they've heard me talk on here and they're like, there's something up with that girl.
You are a redhead. And
it comes with all the
feisty.
Sass and feistiness, and everything they say about redheads is true. Oh, except we do not eat people's souls.
Whoa.
So I have had people say that.
Really?
Yeah, you've never heard that? No. Redheads eat people's souls. We do not.
Oh my gosh.
We do. I do, and this is true for all redheads. We need more anesthesia.
Okay.
Than most people, or whatever the numbing agent is. We need about twice as much as the average person.
Even with dental stuff. Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I have 3 kids and they're all redheads too. And my son, they just had to like 3 times give him 3 different injections to fill his last thing.
Oh,
so there you go.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and we feel cold more so than most people.
Okay.
There you go. There's my unique things you never knew about me.
Unique, and that is interesting.
Yeah. So if you're ever going to try to knock me out, you're going to have to knock me out twice.
Like really hard.
So be ready, because I'm coming at you.
Mercy.
I don't go under the
like
first.
Like a spider monkey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. How about you?
Gosh.
What is your unique thing?
Unique. Okay. So this is unique because people have told me it was. So when I eat peanuts, like with the shell.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm laughing already.
Because it's ridiculous. I throw the whole shell in my mouth and eat it. Like I don't take the peanuts out of the peanut shell.
You eat the shell?
Yeah.
You swallow the shell?
Mm-hmm. Like I chew it up and like everything. This started a number of years ago when I was at like one of those restaurants that puts the peanuts on the table or whatever.
I love those restaurants.
And I don't know, somebody said something about how they would never eat the peanuts with the shell. I was like, I'll try. And they were like salted or whatever. So I just threw it in. I started chewing it and it made everybody laugh. But then the more I chewed it, I was like, man, this like produces raw peanut butter. Like this is like this whole thing that's happening right now. It's like, it's just, it took a little work, but I was like, man, it's kind of good. And then I literally never went back to breaking them out of the shell. I just throw them in. It's always a party surprise. People always like have to double take. Like, did you just eat a whole peanut? Like, what'd you do? I chew it, but then I swallow it. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because I'll put the whole peanut in my mouth and chew the whole thing up, but then I pick out the peanut.
You kind of work it out, spit the shell out.
Yeah. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. They don't actually use the shell when they make real peanut butter.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just
Okay.
assuming that based on
But
what
your
I tasted,
human form of
what I
making
tasted
it.
in my mouth seemed like old school Amish peanut butter in my
I just am
mouth.
thinking
So,
it's stringy and does it scratch your
it's
throat?
Fiber. No, it's fiber. You just gotta, you gotta chew it up pretty good. But so there you go. If you ever want to have a party trick that surprises people immediately, you don't have to be bound to it like I am. But you can eat a whole peanut and people will be amazed and surprised. So
Wow.
there you go.
There he said it.
There he said it.
So here's our weird segue. Do you get burnt out from eating peanuts faster when you have to chew the whole shell? Because I'm thinking that takes longer.
Perfect.
People have now eaten 5 peanuts in the time it took you to eat 1.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I always justify it by I'm believing I'm getting more nutrients than they are because they're throwing all the nutrients out. But Carolyn totally transitioned gracefully into our segment for today, which is the topic of burnout.
Yeah.
And this is a significant topic, one that brings a lot of people into Carolyn's practice, one that brings a lot of people into my office as a pastor in a church. Burnout is a very real thing. And so let's talk briefly about what is burnout so we have a working definition to speak about. And Carolyn, what would you say?
Well, the definition of burnout is that it is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. So if we want to get into what the American Psychological Association says it is, physical, emotional, or mental exhaustion accompanied by decreased motivation, lowered performance, and negative attitudes towards oneself and others.
Okay. So put that in layman's terms, simple to understand, just like how would you give a succinct summary of burnout in your words?
Burnout is total being exhaustion. Just you have overexerted yourself for too long, and now you can no longer go forward.
Yep. Too committed, too connected.
Yep.
Too many irons in the fire,
Yep.
as they say,
Yep.
emotionally, physically, spiritually, you name it.
Yeah.
When I think about burnout, there's a word that immediately I connect with it. And it's a word that when I hear it in society, I don't hear it like most people. The word is busy. It's one of those words, hey, how you doing? Busy. It's a very common thing for guys.
That's more acceptable to say busy.
Yeah, I don't know
burnout.
when girls first meet each other and say their cultural salutations to each other, but guys, we hey man, how you doing? Good to see you. How are things? How's your life? Busy, bro. Busy, real busy. And it always goes like this, busy, man, busy. And then usually the guy who asked the question is like, me too, brother. Yeah, things are busy for me too. And so there's this, they don't realize what's happening, but there's this social exchange that's happening where because one person said they were busy and the other person said they were busy too, they had equal standing in that moment. Socially, one wasn't greater or less. They were equals because they're both busy.
Yeah.
And they didn't define what busy means, but I've learned over the years that when I hear people say I'm busy, my immediate thought is, then I wonder what's broken. Because if you're busy all the time and all you do is work, or all you do is whatever the thing that you justified busy with, something is getting broken.
Yeah.
Something or someone is getting broken. It could be your wife, it could be your husband, it could be your kids, it could be your soul.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that we will sacrifice on the altar of busy that are not blessed.
Yeah. It's
They're not
interesting because you say that's how guys talk. Girls, it's women, it's the same thing, but we name it.
Okay.
Oh man, Sally had soccer and Bobby had baseball and I'm doing
you get into the details
of
busy.
Yeah, and this is what I'm doing and I'm just I'm so exhausted and I'm so busy. Yeah.
I got
but
you.
we will list it, right? And what is it about our society that your accomplishments are defined by how busy you are?
Because that's one of those errant generational things that we inherited that we shouldn't have.
Yeah.
It's a narrative that if you're not doing something with every waking moment of your time, You're a leech on society. You are lazy. You're not a healthy, contributing person. You're not making moves in life. You're not successful. You're not optimistic. You can just fill in all the things with all the negative things.
Yeah.
But it continues to perpetuate a lifestyle that I think is a very American thing, where we are constantly working for that next thing. And if you look at Europe or you look at some, I think Asian culture is really bombarded by that whole, like, you are what you produce and you are what you have learned. And there's a lot of hierarchy there. But if you look at like the European culture, that is not intrinsic to their culture in the sense that, there's midday naps that they build into the workday.
I love that.
What a beautiful truth.
Right?
Oh my gosh. I try to live into this because it's way more productive.
Yeah.
You literally get to take a nap in your least productive part of the day.
Yeah.
Where you're just sitting in your office being, quote, busy, but have produced nothing. You could be taking a nap during that time, wake up refreshed, and for the next 3 or 4 hours of your workday, be ultra productive because you got your win back.
Okay.
Yeah.
You heard it from a pastor. We all need to start taking naps.
Hey, all I'm saying is there is beauty to the margin that comes with giving yourself grace to not be a slave every single day to this tyranny of busy because you think it gives you some sense of worth.
Yeah.
Now, your employer may disagree with me on this because your
Please
worth
check with your
is
employers
directly
first.
tied to how much you produce. But I would go on to say that when you think about these things and you look at the science of it, there is actual data that tells us that people are more productive during their workday if they're given a space to be able to rest and have a little bit of a break, whether it's a nap or just the time to get away. I'm not talking about your lunch hour, like a legitimate space to replenish.
Yeah.
And I think that's the word that when I think about, burnout and how do you make sure that you're not getting burned out emotionally, physically, spiritually, there has to be a rhythm of replenishment.
Yeah. So let's talk, because you keep saying, busy. And so busy causes burnout, right? So some of the main causes of burnout, one ties exactly into what we talked about last week with feelings, is losing sight of what you're feeling, right? So if you're busy, you're not stopping to think about feelings and emotions. Another cause of burnout is not having support or feeling isolated, which can happen when we're busy because we're not spending time with people or friends. Work-life imbalance, that will do it. Overload of work or chores, getting kids to where they need to go because we have them in so many things. Poor self-care can cause burnout.
Yep.
People-pleasing, perfectionism, social media.
Yep.
So these are all these things that we do to keep ourselves busy.
Right.
And they're all causes of burnout.
So, as I hear this in culture, I typically go back to a well-known moment in the Gospels, and it's a moment between Mary and Martha. It's found in Luke chapter 10, verse 38 through 42. And it is this interesting moment, and it can have lots of facets of truth and implication. Just because we might focus on this one in this episode, it doesn't mean it's the epitome of all the truth that moment holds.
Right.
There's all kinds of things that we can learn from this moment between Jesus and these two women that he loves who happen to be sisters. But the context of the moment is essentially that, Martha, Jesus is coming into Martha's home. Okay, he is as big a name in their area as you could possibly imagine. Now they're close with Jesus; they have friendship with him. He's not just like a celebrity. Imagine if, like, I don't know, the biggest movie star rolls up. He's like, "Hey, can I come into your house today?"
Yeah.
You'd be like, "Whoa, let me just pick up a minute. Let me straighten up." Right? I mean, Jesus, kind of a wreck. I don't know. At least get the living room where we're going to be looking manageable. The rest can be a wreck, but the living room should be maybe a little more tidied up. And so in the same way, Martha is feeling that pressure, but she also wants to be loving to Jesus. Her effort is not just a cultural axiom of her being a woman. No, I mean, I genuinely feel when I read this and I understand their relationship and I enter into her sandals in this moment, I think she wants the house to be nice. Her gift of hospitality is kicking in.
Yeah.
The rabbi's tired. She's trying to bless him. And as she's doing this, she's frantic. She's trying to cook and clean and straighten up and put the pillows up and make sure everything's nice. And her sister Mary, God bless her, is sitting, interestingly enough, at Jesus' feet, listening to everything he has to say. And you just get this image that she's kind of like with her hands on her chin, just like looking up at Jesus. Yeah. And her sister's doing all the work. And of course, we know how the story goes. If not, read it for yourself. But Martha essentially asked Jesus for some celestial help here. She goes, Jesus, aren't you concerned that Mary's doing nothing? And she goes on, she goes, tell her to get up and help, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
What a human
like
moment.
It's almost like tattling, right?
Oh, how many times do we hear this with brothers and sisters all the time? Tell them to get up and do something.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. She's saying this to God. God, tell her to get up and do something. She's not busy enough. Mm-hmm. And Jesus, of course, says this most incredible thing that I don't think, if the Bible was just a matter of people writing things, I don't think any human without the inspiration of the Holy Spirit would ever record what he said.
Yeah.
He said, Martha, Martha, you're upset and worried about many things, but only one thing is required. And Mary has chosen what is better, and I'm not going to take it from her.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Talk about an indictment against busy.
Right?
Mercy.
Right.
And
some versions say, right, she's chosen what is good.
Yes.
What is good.
What is good. Yes.
Sitting at the Savior's feet.
Listening, even in the midst of a cultural situation that all but demanded that things be a particular way and that particular people are doing particular things. And certainly Mary knew that, but she chose to go countercultural. Mm-hmm. She chose to go opposite of the tide. And I think that's when we think about busy, the tide is to say, get your paddle and start paddling with the current of busy. Be busy too.
Yeah.
So you have social standing, so you have worth, so you're accepted. Yeah. And what I think we really need to be thinking about is that we actually need to paddle against the grain of busy. We have to go upstream against a pretty fast rushing water.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how do we do that? I had a moment in my life a few years ago where I think the outcome of burnout almost claimed me and my ministry.
Wow.
And so, it was a season where I was newer to being in ministry. I always felt like least at the table. We talked about this a little bit in one of our sessions prior. And so to gain credibility, I said yes to everything that came my way.
Yeah.
It wasn't if I felt God was leading me to it or I was even gifted for it. If someone thought that I had the ability, I just said yes.
Yeah.
And I was doing that from a place of unhealth.
Yeah.
Right? My identity is tied to what I do. And so I got to this place where an older gentleman who was a mentor of mine and loved me, and I gave him permission to just tell me the truth, like no matter what, even when it hurts. And he had sat me down and he's like, man, I'm really concerned about you. That joy I used to see in you that was like natural, it's like intrinsic to who you are, has seemed to like fade. And you're doing all the things that originally used to tell me like were the epicenter of joy. You're serving God, you're helping people, and you just don't seem as bright anymore. Like your spirit doesn't seem as bright anymore. Wow. And he said, I want you to do an exercise that he said a businessman had asked him to do a number of years prior. He said, I want you to take a regular piece of paper with lines. And he said, I want you to write down everything that you are spiritually, physically, emotionally, or financially attached to. It takes some amount of energy from you to maintain this attachment. Yeah. Whatever it is, write it down and spare nothing. So I'm like, it's probably going to just be a short little list. Big things start coming to mind. And so I start writing them down. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to finish grad school, and that takes up, X amount of time in my day. And I'm coaching football, and that takes up a lot of time. And I'm serving a church, and I'm on multiple boards. And then the list just kept going. I was like, well, I'm in 4 small groups a week because and they all meet at 6:00 in the morning because the dudes who are in there go to work and it's the only time that they said they're available. And so I don't want to miss an opportunity to catch them. So I'm going to catch them at my own expense, every group, 6 in the morning. Doing that at the time we're still having kids. So husband to 1, father to a growing flock of 4. Mm-hmm. And I just kept going down this list further and further. And what I thought was going to be a small list ended up filling the page.
Wow.
And I could see with my own eyes why I felt the way I felt and how my friend who knew me well could see what he was seeing.
Yeah.
So my tank was very empty, and some of it was I didn't really ponder how many things I truly was involved with. And I think when many people are struggling with burnout, they too have not truly considered how much you do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great thing to do, because you don't really, like, how do you know you're burnt out?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one way to tell for sure.
Yeah.
And then there's some symptoms of burnout, right? Like you have a loss of enthusiasm for what you're doing, which is what he was seeing in you.
Whether diminishing spirit,
your job, whether it be your kids' sporting events, whether it be making dinner, hanging out with friends, you lose your enthusiasm. You have reduced performance at work and home. You have more worry and anxiety. You're exhausted. You're fatigued all the time. Stressed. You're having sleep issues. Either you're sleeping too much or you're not sleeping enough because your brain's constantly going. Yep. You're irritable. If you find yourself biting people's heads off a lot, you might be burnt out.
Could be some burnout, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's things like, again, the isolation, uncontrollable procrastination. You start procrastinating stuff because, again, you're just not motivated anymore. It doesn't make you happy anymore.
Yeah.
And then and even sudden changes in your diet. You're eating too much. You're not eating enough. It's that self-care thing. You're not focused on what you need to be healthy.
Sure. So busy is like this nuanced thing, right? So, and I find this particularly pronounced within working moms or stay-at-home moms. They have this, often when I talk to them, they have this very diminished view of how important they are in the home, especially with stay-at-home moms. You know, if they were working before and now they've been at home and growing a family, and they think that that's not as busy as, let's say, a working professional mom who's out there doing both. But then they don't recognize how much they actually do in the course of a day, that if you were to be monetizing these things or putting a salary based on it, right? It would be a pretty high salary if the salary was based on the activity that goes towards developing that outcome. And so that would be huge.
Right.
But they feel like it's not a big deal.
Right. Because you're a teacher, you're a cook, you're a counselor.
Yeah. You're a taxi driver.
You're a taxi driver.
Right.
Yeah. You're a seamstress.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on there.
So many things.
Right. So for me, the experience of writing down all the things I was physically, financially, emotionally, spiritually attached to, and I was doing that were under the title of busy, was pretty eye-opening. But what it challenged me to do next was really the heart of the experience, and I think it was the epicenter of where I started to find a new way to go forward, to not flirt with this burnout so much. He said, now, Brett, he goes, listen, I want you to go through and I want you to take everything you wrote and I want you to make two categories. One says good, one says excellent. Now I want you to go through and start putting these things where you believe they should be. So, okay, I'm going to help you. Where does coaching football fall in? Is that good or excellent? And it was really hard to answer those questions.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, on a very tangible level, coaching football is excellent.
Yeah, especially if you're winning.
Right. Molding lives, reaching families who don't go to our church with the love of Jesus in practical, tangible ways. It's certainly, he said, well, let me give you an example. He said, excellent is you spending time with God.
Oh.
He said, excellent is you making sure that you are dating your wife. Excellent is making sure that you are spending time with your sons in ways that matter to them.
Yeah.
He said, now that's excellent. So now think about this through that lens. And he said something to me I'll never forget, and I hope this stands out to those who are listening too, is he said, many people will sacrifice what is excellent for what is good. And that was a really powerful truth for me, because I looked at that list and there was nothing sinful on there. It wasn't
right.
Oh, I'm burned out because I'm spending too much time, I don't know, at the casino or at the club or something. I don't know,
Right.
It's just not good for my season of life.
Yeah.
So it wasn't if I scratch that off, I'll have more bandwidth. All the things were good.
Yeah.
All the things had to do with God or people. And all of them mattered to me. None of them were light. But when I had to do the hard work of thinking, okay, but is there anything good that's forsaking what is excellent? Because if I continue to do that, that's just not a wise way to live life. Then I'm going to continue to flirt with burnout, and I won't know how to establish boundaries to maintain the things that are actually excellent for me and for my life and for my ministry and for my family. So when I started doing that, lots of things made it under good and a few things made it under excellent. And then he simply started asking the question, what on the good side needs to go? Okay. We're not going to take anything off the excellent side because those are the things that need to be. Right. What here needs to go? And he said, do you need to be in 4 men's Bible studies every week? Well, I mean, kind of, right? I mean, like, I'm the ones that invited them. I'm kind of like the Bible teacher for these guys because they're new Christians. He's like, okay, is there anyone that you can raise up to be in 2 of these? You can stay in 2. Is there anyone that you can see leadership gifts in that over the next maybe month with a little bit of, intent that they could take the group over for you? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I think so. And it forced me to recognize that I am not as important as I think I am. And that we in general are not as important as we think we are.
That's probably hard for some people to hear.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Especially when you're building your identity based on how many things I can be involved in.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to take myself out of 2. Well, those are 2 tokens that added to my value.
Yeah.
Well, now they're gone.
Yeah. Super mom who thinks, I can do everything. I can cook all the meals. I can work full time. I can cook all the meals.
All the stuff.
I can, all the stuff.
So then 2 tokens of good came off and 2 tokens of excellent were added in. So those 2 mornings that I would typically get up early and go meet with men, I now sleep in a bit and I have coffee and devotions with my wife. Oh. Wow.
Yeah.
So now we've transacted good for excellent. And he just kept going down the list. He's like, do you need to be on this many boards? Why are you on that many boards? Well, if I'm honest, I'm trying to gauge my value, and everyone around me is smarter and has more experience, and so I'm just trying to justify my existence. He's like, yeah, you don't have to do that. Let's get off some of these. He's like, what is the number 1 board that your gifts, talents, and abilities align with? I'm like, it's this one. He's like, then that's the one you stay on. Move to excellent. What about the rest? I think I help. There's people who are really gifted there. Lots of good leaders. I don't think they need me. Yeah. Good. Dip off them. Do so with dignity. If you made a commitment, fulfill it, and then dip. Like, it's not just like, oh gosh, I understood this is, good. I'm going to drop it. No, be responsible. You don't get to just do that. But there was a way to do it, and I started being proactive, and he helped me. He's like, hey, you said you were going to get off 2 of those boards. How's that going? Yeah. Like you said, the end date was April. It's March, homie. Are you off? And what's going on? So we had some really good conversations there. And so that good work did take somebody who loved me and was mature enough to see the symptoms and sit down. And so what we hope in these podcasts is that while we may never meet you, Carolyn and I may never meet you, this is a way for us to equip you to be that person in someone's life that you're seeing the warning signs. Yeah. The dashboard lights are all blinking, warning. And you're going to be the one that's going to sit down and be like, hey, I love you. I'm concerned you're going to burn out. And then you could bring them to an exercise like this that I was brought to. That's simple, practical. You can make it your own. You can add stuff to it if you want. But this has been my experience that helped me. And I have done this with probably hundreds of people since he did it with me. And I think they have benefited greatly just by putting these simple practices into practice.
Yeah, that's huge. I love that. I love that practice in general because it helps you identify everything so that you can see, oh, this is why I feel burnt out. And then it helps you practically take the steps to heal and then avoid burnout in the future. And that it's good and excellent, right? A lot of times we make a list and we were like, okay, what's bad, what's okay, and what's excellent? And you're going to look at your life and be like, well, none of that's bad.
Yeah. There's very few bad things that are going to show up on there.
Right. So to be like, no, these are good, but we're aiming for excellence.
Yeah.
And excellence.
Knowing the difference.
Excellence is not status. Excellence is relationship with God, with your spouse, with your kids.
That's right. Yeah, that core group that God has given you to shepherd. And I think we talked about this in the sense that what dropping things off that list allowed me to do was it allowed me to replenish. So like when I had devotions with my wife, that was not work. That was not stressful. Yeah. That was just a good cup of coffee and the love of my life, sitting on a couch, talking about God's word together. That was excellent and allowed me to replenish.
Yeah.
Taking some of those things off and empowering other people to take them on, or just removing myself from that situation, allowed time for me to do the things that Jesus did, which again, like on this podcast, we constantly go back to that truth. Don't just listen to us because we say things. Like, this is a podcast about biblical perspective and biblical truth. And so if we can point you back to the Bible and say, listen, the greatest example of this is from the Master. So what did he do to replenish and not burn out? We should look at those things. And I constantly think of Psalm 23, which people know, we've heard, but we miss the opening refrain often. The Lord is my shepherd.
Yes.
I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes, or another version might say, he restores my soul.
Right.
So we need to understand, what does it mean to replenish? Because to replenish is the opposite of burnout.
Yep. Exactly.
So then how do we learn from the Master Jesus himself how to replenish? What are some of the things that he did that you notice when you read the Gospels, Carolyn, that you encourage people to do that are living into the life of Jesus?
My biggest thing I would say is he rested.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you've got the Sabbath. Here's a whole day of rest. He took time away from people. I think when I look at the life of Jesus, he wasn't doing, he was being, right? He wasn't a human doing. He was speaking, he was talking, but what was he speaking and talking about? The gospel. I mean, he was promoting the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
And so I don't look at Jesus's life and think, oh, he was so busy. Like, he was busy.
Right.
He was doing stuff.
Right.
And yet
he didn't seem busy.
Yeah. It
Crazy.
Did,
I guess I never thought about that. You're right. I 100% agree with you.
Where you look at the story of Mary and Martha and you're like, no, she was busy.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Martha's
read
busy
that
right now.
story and I can just imagine her in the kitchen throwing pots and pans around, wiping things and doing all of that.
Yeah.
And being busy.
Yeah.
Doing busy.
Sure.
And he was,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That is very interesting. I have never looked at the reading of the Bible and concluded, man, Jesus was just busy. He was doing a ton of stuff, but there was such margin in how he lived his life that it almost seemed natural that he could do all these things because he had the margins he had.
Yeah. Well, think about this. You talked in our last episode on feelings, and we were talking about Jesus's feelings, and you were talking about him being exhausted because he walked everywhere.
Right.
Right. Well, so he could have been in a hurry. He could have been like, get me a donkey. We got to do this fast and get from place to place. Yeah. But he took that time of walking. I'm sure there was reflection during that time. Mm-hmm. There was talking to his Father during that time. Mm-hmm. There was a sense of mental rest during that, where we're like, hop in the car. We got to go. Let's go to this place. Let's go. We're in a hurry all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
So you see those places of slow and slowing down.
Slow equips us to go, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. You talked about something and I just want to speak on this for a minute. You talked about Sabbath.
Yeah.
That is one of the reasons I flirted with burnout in ministry in ways that I'm not too proud to say. Okay. So here's the thing. God created the rhythm and cycle of work in a way that recognizing a 24-hour span of rest is very important.
Yeah.
I am not one that says it has to be a specific day. If you don't do it on this day, God's going to be mad at you. Right. For instance, I take my Sabbath on Monday. Well, Pastor, what do you mean? Well, I'm working on Sunday.
Yeah.
It's kind of important for me to work on Sunday. Right. I don't show up, things get weird. So I take Monday. And I will say that's been my Sabbath for 15 years. Mm-hmm. I've only truly honored it for 5.
Okay.
Because Monday was always a day that helped me get ahead of the work of the week.
Yeah.
I didn't want to come in on Tuesday and have a mountain. I'd rather have a molehill. And the way that I did that is I started answering emails, right, making phone calls, doing stuff on, Mondays. And I wasn't honoring the Sabbath, and it wasn't like God was up in heaven shaking his head at me as if he was so disappointed in me. I think when the Father sees us take the things that he says, listen, Brett, it's good to rest, and we do them, I think it breaks his heart. Like, man, he needs rest. He should be resting today.
Yeah.
But he's choosing, busy. He's not choosing what is better, as Jesus said. He's choosing what is not better. And so, that was a big part of it, is that I never really had a full 24-hour rest where like I didn't pick up the cares of the congregation and take them with me in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. It felt for a season that was unloving. It felt like I was being a bad pastor. And I think a lot of pastors feel that way. That's why they don't take Sabbath, is because they don't want to be derelict in their compassion and nurturing of the flock. Because trust me, there's not a day that doesn't go by that somebody doesn't message me about something hard, hurtful, damaging, wounding, you name it.
Yeah.
And we live in a day and age where pastors and counselors, for that matter, are more accessible than ever before.
Oh, yeah.
If you wanted to talk to pastor 50 years ago, you had to make an office appointment.
Right.
Maybe you stop by the house. Now I get messages on Facebook Messenger, Instagram, email, phone call, you name it. We're super accessible.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing.
No.
It can become a bad thing
Yep.
if you don't put boundaries. So I had to learn hard things. Like when people would message me on a Monday, like I came up with a reply.
Oh.
And I just copy and paste it if it seems appropriate. That's like, hey, thank you for reaching out. You matter to me. I will make it a point to contact you first thing tomorrow. Talk to you then.
Yeah.
And I will say there's never been a time that somebody wrote me back and be like, jerk, what an unloving shepherd you are. And if it's an emergency, that's different, right? There's there always has to be caveat. Like even on the Sabbath, Jesus said, if a man's ox or donkey falls into the ditch, aren't you going to go and pull it out? You're going to let it kick it there for another 24 hours?
Sorry, got to rest.
Poor ox. Sorry, God said I got to rest. No, he said you go down and get it.
Yeah.
And then you go back to doing the rest thing again. That's good. And so like if emergencies come, someone dies, or I need to be bedside with somebody, I don't send that text and be like, talk to you on Tuesday.
Yeah.
I say I'm on my way and I'll be there in a moment. But I also had to reflect that every text I got did not demand that I'll be there in a moment kind of response.
Yes.
I had to give myself grace.
Yes, exactly.
And so one reason why a lot of people today are burned out is because you don't take an actual Sabbath. You do not take 24 hours to not email, to not talk to people, to not rest, to not work, right? Because again, Sabbath is about doing things that bring you joy. The Sabbath was not so much thou shalt not, it was you have permission to.
Yeah.
And so like all these old ways that church people will tell me that there's pain in their life, like, oh, I went to a church that said like, you couldn't play on the Sabbath. I didn't grow up in the church. I hear this kind of crazy stuff. I'm like, why can't you play on the Sabbath? Oh, God gets mad. God gets mad if kids play?
Right.
Apparently.
Right.
Where does it say that in the book?
No, one way I love
That's a weird thing.
I know. One way I love someone who I've heard describe Sabbath is you do basically like the opposite of what you do every day. So if you are like someone who is out in the almond orchards every day.
Nice.
And you take your Sabbath and you work physical all week long.
Yeah.
Don't do something physical.
Yeah. You shouldn't find your way out to the almond orchard that day. Right?
Yeah. If you, like you said, you made the comment like, oh, don't talk to people. But if you're in a job, maybe like mine, where, I talk to one person.
Right. Yeah.
I want to go out and be with people and do that. Like, that's how I rest. So how people rest is going to look different, but make sure it is rest.
Yes.
For your soul.
For your soul. And work can't leak in under justifiable pretense.
Right.
So exactly right. Sabbath is not thou shalt not, it's thou have permission to. And so if I mow my lawn on the Sabbath, honestly, this sounds crazy, that's not work to me.
Right.
It feels good to me. I enjoy starting a task and completing it. And in a life of ministry where nothing is ever complete, it feels good to turn the mower off and say, the lawn is mowed for this week. Yeah. And it just feels good to me. And, and I've had people ask me about that. Like when I, at different communities, again, people have different understandings of Sabbath. But I've had people approach me and be like, oh, pastor, like, you're not supposed to mow your lawn on the Sabbath. I'm like, where do you guys get this stuff from? Like, seriously, like, I am grateful to know God today in the way that the Bible shows him in his beauty, because there are so many things that people did to people over the years that have just made God seem so cruel and mean that he would punish you because you played on a... Come on. So here's my thing. I'm getting off topic here, but here's my thing. I hear this every single harvest time. Oh, Pastor, I'll see you in about a month. I'm not going to be at church for a month. Why aren't you going to be at church for a month? Well, I got to get the harvest in. You got to get the harvest in on Sunday from 8:30 to 9:30 or from 10:30 to 11:30. You have to miss service. Yeah, it's important. Okay, so let me get this right. You are going to pray to the Lord of the harvest to bless your harvest while you completely disregard his command to rest. Mm-hmm. I said, does that seem crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, this is how I talk to people. You've seen me do this.
Yeah.
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 You know, and they're like,
It's
well,
truth.
I guess
Truth
I never
bombs.
thought about it that way. I was like, bro, God's not going to destroy your crop because you chose to worship with God's people and come under his teaching and rest for a day.
Right.
And Monday to go in with that vigor and strength that a good day of rest and worship will give you.
Right.
You have to realize how crazy this sounds.
Yeah.
But next weekend, they'll be out there missing service again, and they'll be out because again, they inherited something that wasn't good. That's what their dads did. That's what their grandpas did. That's what their grandpas did.
And
now you don't break it.
Their kids are going to end up doing the same thing.
Exactly right. And that's why it's like we have to stand up and say, no, don't pass this on to your kids, because you're going to mess up a whole nother generation who aren't going to understand the value of Sabbath.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jesus Sabbath.
Rest comes in different forms. It's physical rest, emotional rest, social rest, creative rest, sensory rest, mental rest.
Yes.
So because I say that because oftentimes we think of rest as I'm just going to lay on the couch and watch football all day.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that if that's how you rest.
That might be your thing, sure.
That's how I watch during baseball.
Yeah.
My Sabbath usually includes me laying on the couch watching a baseball game.
A little vegging,
a little Giants game, and that's how my soul gets filled.
Mm-hmm.
Not filled, but rested.
Rested, yeah.
God fills my soul. Just want to clarify.
Got you.
Not baseball. So I don't want people to hear like there's only one way to rest.
Yeah.
There's different. I need mental rest because I'm mentally putting it out there for people. I need sometimes creative rest because I'm trying to create content or stuff for people. And so it's like, I don't do that on this day.
Yeah. I need social rest. I'm around people all the time, and I'm naturally, and this is surprising. This could have been my surprising thing about Brett, but I'm actually way more introverted than people think because they always see me in a public place. But that's part of my calling. That's part of my gift. It drains me. There's only so much of that I can give.
Yeah.
And so often when Sarah and I, my wife, would have a disagreement about something, it's because she's been around kids all day and wants to be social.
Yeah.
I've been around people all day who act like kids and don't want to be social. I want to sit in my room and like stare at the wall for like 3 hours just to like get some energy back. And so usually our conflict is like, well, we were invited over to someone's house for dinner. Like, let's go. And it's like, babe, I would rather not, And so there has to be compromise. But that really is a real thing that like happens.
Because rest looks different for everybody.
Rest looks different for everybody.
So you have to figure out that compromise, especially in marriage.
So Sabbath is one thing I think that's huge that Jesus did really well that stopped him from burning out. It's going to help you listening or watching this today too. I think another thing that he did, and we talked a little bit about this in the Boundaries episode, but this is a little bit different, is that he created margin for himself to replenish with God. And he did that through silence, and he did that through solitude.
Margin is huge because I think that most of us don't have margin, and maybe some people don't even know what margin is.
Tell them.
So I always take, when I'm in sessions, I have my little yellow legal notepad that I take notes on, and I'm terrible because I used to be that person that wrote from edge to edge.
Oh.
And I left myself no margin, right? So the margin is that little, 1 inch, 2 inch, it can be whatever.
Around the paragraph.
Little space before that, there's a line, and then you have the paper. And so you're supposed to leave the margin empty.
Right.
To give yourself margin. And so like for me, like when I'm writing something, if I'm taking notes or whatever, and I'm using the margin and I'm not leaving any space.
Sure.
If I need to go in and add something, well, I'm now like writing really small, making arrows down to the bottom of the page. Oh, go see here. And it's looking like a mess.
Right.
But if I would have left that margin, when something new comes up that I have to add to there, I have the space for it and it stays not chaotic.
It fits more naturally into what's happening.
It looks better.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And it works better. It's more functional. Some people, I think to that point of margin, don't have margin today because they're just really poor time managers.
Oh, yeah.
I found this out about my kids, right?
Yep.
As they're trying to get ready to go to school, there's always this frenzy in the morning of where are my clothes? Like, where's my hair product? Where's my all the stuff.
Yeah.
So I took the boys one day and I said, hey, listen, this is what dad does to not be stressed in the morning. I lay my clothes out the day before. I actually pick out my outfit based on the things that I'm going to do that day, who I'm going to meet with and where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
And I iron or do all my stuff the day before. And those clothes are waiting for me in the morning.
Yep.
So then when I wake up, I don't have to stress about what I'm going to wear. I can go eat a nice bowl of cereal. I can think a little bit. I've created margin. You can do the same if you simply will just pick your clothes out the day before.
Yeah.
They don't do this. They still continue to be crazy. But they're kids, and I hope we're installing seeds into their adult years that will give them that best practice.
And with that margin you've created, let's say you're eating your delicious bowl of cereal and you spill it on your shirt. You're not freaking out because I don't have time to fix this. Well, you do because you've created that margin in the morning.
Go get another shirt ready.
Go get another shirt.
Right.
You're not invoking mass chaos in your home.
Right. So that idea of margin is critical, but it also comes with boundaries. And what we were saying about silence and solitude is a really difficult thing. But again, when you apply it through the example of the master, it truly is benefiting our souls. So Jesus is, the Bible will often say, often withdrew to quiet and lonely spaces. And that sounds kind of gloomy, kind of depressing. It's not. It's meant to be what it is. It's space. He had this hard day of doing ministry. He got frustrated, exhausted, happy, sad, every emotion you can imagine. And then there came this pivotal part of the night where he's like, you disciples stay here. And sometimes that hurt their feelings. They didn't understand. Like, well, we want to hang out. We want to hear what you're going to say over there, like you were saying it over here. He's like, well, I'm going to have more things to say to you.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm going to get the energy back to just be around you, Peter, tomorrow. Okay? So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to have some silence and solitude. And so, that was hard for me as a person. And I think that's hard for a lot of people because we're not good with silence.
No.
To your opening point that you are like a master at it, which is fantastic. But I think,
try it.
As a culture, there's not a lot of people that enter into it like you do with that joy. And the other is, so we don't know how to do silence, and we don't know how to do solitude. We don't know how to just be in a moment.
Be still.
Be still, right? Scripture tells us, be still, know that I'm God. So there's lots of moments where in the midst of silence and solitude, God speaks. We see this with Elisha in the cave. As he's being chased by the prophets of Baal, he's in this cave alone. And God whispers to him, a whisper, right? And that's interesting. And I thought about that because God does whisper in these moments where we put his life into our practice. And so you're going to have to get okay with being by yourself for an extended amount of time that isn't full of noise.
Right.
And the way that I did this, and if you have another way that's helpful, please share it. The way I did it was I started with 5 minutes. I set a timer. And I went to a place that I knew would be quiet and distraction-free. Yeah. And I set a timer for 5 minutes. And you know the first thing I found?
It felt like an eternity.
It felt like 55 minutes.
Yeah.
I kid you not. It was like time stopped.
Yeah, I know people who will literally need to start at like 60 seconds. Like, that's
maybe
all I can
go
do.
there. Because 5 was like,
I can
whoa,
do 60
dude.
seconds. And because why? Because we live in a society, again, of busy. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Back in the day, you went and you stood in line somewhere. You'd talk to the people around you, or you'd stand there in silence. Now, what do? You pull out your phone.
In silence, and I'm scrolling through 1,000 voices right now.
And throwing so many things into my brain.
Exactly. So that's good. Maybe shorter than 5 for sure.
Yeah,
that felt like a
if 5
very
feels
long
forever,
time.
start at 60 seconds.
Start
if
with
you need
60.
to start at 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, and give yourself some grace. Like I felt kind of bad. Like when I did this, I was like, I can't make my brain stop, and I think I'm supposed to be silent. But that's not the goal. Again, God knows your heart and your intent. If your heart and intent to the Father is to say, I want to be like your son. I want to do the things I saw him do.
Yeah.
I know that this is important. And, you start to feel bad because you're starting to think, am I doing it right? Oh, I'm not supposed to talk in my mind. Right. Sorry, God.
Right.
I wasn't supposed to say that. Oh, sorry again. I'm still talking. It just becomes this really awkward moment where you're like, I think I messed this whole thing up. You come out of the prayer closet all jacked up and it's not good. But I needed someone to kind of say, like, listen, just get in a place where you're not distracted, where your kids aren't going to knock on the door or cars aren't going to drive by and you're going to start thinking about the color of red the car was. Like, find a place where you can be as undistracted as you can be and recognize that there's going to be a conversation happening in your head that is not offensive to God.
Right.
As you get better at this, and I found this to be true, and better literally comes through practice. There's no way of just like reading a book and getting better. Yeah. I found helpful things in books about silent solitudes. Like there's a book by Richard Foster that we can link to called The Celebration of Discipline. And it looks at these 7 ancient monastic steps that they took to put some of these holy practices like fasting into their life, silence and solitude, these things that most people don't do that we see lifted up in the life of Jesus, honoring the Sabbath, like all this stuff. And I found that reading the books were helpful in giving me a direction, but the only thing that made my silence and solitude better was continuing to pursue silence and solitude.
Right. Practice makes progress.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good way to say that because I did progress. And I got to the point where I was spending a half an hour in silence and solitude. And when I would leave, I felt like it wasn't long enough.
Yeah.
Where I started, I was like, dude, I could not get through 5 without being mad awkward.
Yeah.
To the point where I was like, I think, and this is what God wants from me. He wants me to replenish. He wants me to trust him, which really is what Sabbath is about. If you really think about it in that way, it's just trusting God. You're not going to ruin my life by me not being busy for 24 hours because I'm doing what you asked me to do. You're not going to ruin my family because of that.
Right.
It's irrational.
Right.
Okay. So then, so Sabbath is really just trusting God and creating boundaries for burnout where you learn what is good and what is excellent is truly trusting God as well. It's a trust experiment. Less of you, more of him. And as we continue to do that, we do start to find a replenished body, a replenished mind, a replenished spirit, and a replenished being. Because that really is the heart and whole of our being is body, mind, and soul. Yeah. That's the Hebrew idea of the human whole. Yeah. And so as we do those things, we're certainly going to find much more margin and bandwidth. So I think the question is, as we think about this in practice and as we close, a couple simple steps for you to consider who's listening or watching this today. What brings you life? Yeah. What truly brings you life? If you're like, back in the day when I was a kid, I used to walk in the woods and I would get out there for an hour or two and it was awesome and there was nowhere good. Go walk in the woods. I'm 46. Great. Yeah. Go walk in the woods. Yeah. Make sure you know how to get back. Right? Don't get lost in the woods. That young you could navigate better than the old you can. So create markers. Yeah. Go out in the woods.
Whatever you like. I'm doing that today. I'm going to the theater today.
The theater.
And I haven't been
the theater. The theater.
And I haven't been in years. But that is something that that is a Sabbath for me. That is resting for me because it's something that fills me that I love doing. Grew up doing it. We'd go to the theater. No, I want to say it that way.
Yes, it's very nice.
All the time and stuff. And so I'm like, I've decided I'm going to start doing that again, right? Because we get busy and we put aside the things that bring us joy and fulfill us.
We sacrifice the excellent for the good.
Yep.
So find your thing that brings you life and do it. Whatever that is, give yourself grace, space, and permission to go and do that thing. The second thing that I think helps combat burnout is fostering an attitude of gratitude. And we didn't talk much about this. It's probably a whole nother session that we can do on the podcast at some point. But this is not positive thinking. This is not name it and claim it theology. All of that is junk. I can assure you of it. Yep. Fostering an attitude of gratitude is different. It's looking around and instead of bemoaning the things you wish you had, you celebrate the things you have and you give God thanks for them.
Yeah.
So rather than saying, well, I wish I had a kid to get straight A's.
Yeah.
We say, God, I'm just grateful I have a kid.
Right. Perspective change.
Thank you, God.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the good they bring in my life. I can be frustrated about their grades, but hey, thank you for who they are.
Yeah.
And that changes that heart and that disposition just with that simple essence of gratitude towards the things. And so related to burnout, it might be, God, thank you for showing me how overstretched I am. Mm-hmm. Thank you for allowing me to be in 4 different boards and lots of Bible studies and lots of things. I feel so valued, but Lord, I've also come to see my value is not found in the things that I do.
Yep.
It's found in you. Yeah. And thank you for showing me that, even in a way that at first might have kind of hurt or felt awkward. Mm-hmm. Like, thank you for showing me that the course I was on was going to lead to an iceberg. Thank you, God. I appreciate you and I love you for that.
Yeah.
And then as, we continue to kind of live into these rhythms of Jesus's life, we look at the things that he did and we long for them in our life, not in perfection, but in direction. And as we apply Sabbath, as we apply silence and solitude, as we create margin, and as we learn from the example of Mary over Martha, we start to apply these holy rhythms and we encounter God. And it's a good thing.
Yep. It is. There, you said it.
And there, we said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. If you want to stay informed about our podcast, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Search for There, We Said It. If you like what you hear, you can like, subscribe, and leave comments in all the places that you find us. And if you ever have any questions, please reach out to us at contact@therewesaiditpodcast.com. We'd love to chat with you more there.